New Age came right at everybody in 1980 with a book called The Aquarian Conspiracy. The Aquarian Conspiracy basically said, we're here and we're going to make this happen. It's going to take a little while, but we're going to do it. And here's what the author said. Usually at the point of crisis, someone has a great heretical idea. A powerful new insight explains the apparent contradictions. It introduces a new principle, a new perspective. Given the superior scope of the new idea, we might expect it to prevail rather quickly, but that almost never happens. The problem is that you can't embrace the new paradigm unless you let go of the old. If these discoveries of transformation are to become our common heritage for the first time in history, they must be widely communicated. They must become our new consensus, what everybody knows. In the book of Matthew, when it says, while men slept, the enemy came and sowed tares. That's what's kind of happened. A lot of people think that the New Age was something that happened back with Shirley MacLaine. That is exactly what the devil wants you to think of the New Age. It's just Shirley MacLaine running down the beach with crystals or whatever, saying, I am God. And there were a lot of introductions that were made in the 80s, but it's never stopped. It's just become bigger and bigger. But they are no longer referring to themselves as the New Age. They're now referring to themselves as the new spirituality.
And many are subconsciously aware of the inner worlds opening up and the dawn of a new spirituality.
But the reason spirituality matters is because spirituality gives you a context for rejoicing in the infinite possibilities. In my own career, people used to come hear me say things they didn't already know. Those days are over. We've all read the same books. We've all listened to the same tapes. The very fact that you're where you are, by definition, this isn't that you're coming to something like this to hear something new. We are rather coming to nights like tonight to access more deeply the things which by now all of us already know.
I remember when I first came into the faith, a friend of mine, Will Barron, who had come out of the New Age, said that in England, where he was from, all this stuff was rampant. But at that stage, back in the mid-'80s, it was just sort of working its way in through people like Shirley MacLaine and M. Scott Peck, and then eventually the huge force of Oprah Winfrey. But we're now there. We're where things are just exploding all around us, and there's so many things happening that sometimes it's hard to keep track of it. When I was in the New Age, I went to an Edgar Cayce conference. We used to do our daily meditation, and it would start off with Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. A lot of people think that the New Age is like all these different things. Well, there's a bottom line. And the bottom line is that we are all one because we are all God, because we are all Christ. God is in everyone. I told my wife, I said, these guys are all saying the same thing. It doesn't matter if you're meditating, doing TM in India, or whether you're, watching Oprah. You've got the same bottom line philosophy. M. Scott Peck in that book said, to put it plainly, our unconscious is God, God within us. We were part of God all the time. You've got Shirley MacLaine, and then you've got Oprah Winfrey in 1987 on a show with Marilyn Ferguson, who wrote The Aquarian Conspiracy. She said, what I would recommend is that you read Eric Butterworth's book, Discover the Power Within You. Butterworth talks about the divinity of man over 100 times in that book.
And when I was through with the good books in the store, and they had lots of good books, I found another line of books. And the books were by Baptists, Catholics, Episcopalians, Presbyterians, Mennonites. And the books all sounded far more like each other than they did the respective teachings of their respective denominations. We need a transformation. We need to see ourselves as part of an interconnected whole. And I wondered, where were they getting this? I thought for the very first time in my life that maybe I should write a book. And I was going to call it, my original thought was, call it Come Out of Her, My People, the growing apostasy of American religious life. I had no idea I was looking at something far, far bigger.
New Agers consistently claim that they don't adhere to any one set of spiritual or religious beliefs. One website defines the New Age as, quote, a free-flowing, decentralized spiritual movement. Unlike most formal religions, it has no holy text, central organization, formal membership, ordained clergy, geographic center, dogma, creed, etc. This is, however, part of the propaganda, for there are far more differences between the many denominations of Christianity than there are among the New Age books and authors which define the parameters of the movement. And even though there is not an officially recognized New Age holy book, like the Bible within Christianity or the Quran within Islam, the New Age movement indeed has very specific spiritual beliefs and authoritative texts. Even the website cannot help but refer to the New Age as, quote, a network of believers and practitioners, the word network implying association, common interest, and common goals. And the site also notes how the New Age movement has brilliantly disguised itself. Quote, their book publishers take the place of a central organization. Seminars, conventions, books, and informal groups replace sermons and religious services. When we carefully listen to what New Agers have to say regarding spirituality and religion, we can hear them consistently preach the exact same basic ideas, often using similar or identical phrases and concepts. For example, New Age gurus and authors consistently encourage meditation, yoga, and searching within, and often speak of inner peace, balance, global brotherhood, and the spiritual path, human consciousness, and the ability to elevate it through collective action and personal meditative practice is also a consistent theme. Indeed, the New Age movement has very specific ideas and central tenets about God, humans, and the world, and for those familiar with its terminology, it is a very easy movement to define and identify. This is because the New Age movement is not new, but is rather a modern-day rebirth of a very specific set of ancient occult teachings. Still, New Agers try to paint their movement as being simply an amalgamation of various aspects from all the world's religions. The truth, however, is that the New Age always rejects the central beliefs of biblical Christianity, especially the notions of original sin and exclusive salvation through Jesus Christ. If the New Age movement truly recognized all religions as legitimate paths to God, as it claims to do, then it would honor biblical Christianity as another spiritual path. But as you will see, many New Age leaders devote much time to deliberately speaking out against the Bible and its presentation of Jesus Christ as the only begotten Son of God and the only legitimate path to heaven. The New Age pushes an entirely different kind of Jesus.
Oprah Winfrey, this year, I don't know what the significance was, but she started teaching the Course in Miracles with Marianne Williamson. The Course in Miracles is teaching supposedly from Jesus, channeled through a psychologist in New York City. I was involved in it. I believed it. I did it. And that Jesus it's like the Bible upside down.
My guest today is Marianne Williamson. Many of you know who she is because thousands of people every week, poor people and rich people and lots of celebrities, go to hear Marianne Williamson speak in Los Angeles and also in New York City. And what she talks about is based on a set of books. Many of you have heard about them, called A Course in Miracles. Marianne has become a teacher, a leader in the philosophy that I personally know could change the world.
He says the journey to the cross is the last useless journey. Do not make the pathetic error of clinging to the old rugged cross. Am I the Christ? Oh yeah, and you are too. There's no sin, there's no devil, and basically the atonement is knowing that you don't need salvation because you never sinned.
Atonement is an internal, going to God with our sins. We don't call them sins in a more enlightened perspective, but our mistakes. But it was the consciousness of Moses. It was the consciousness of Buddha. It was the consciousness of Jesus. So what happens is that Buddha and Jesus and Moses and any of the great religious figures, they are doors. There's only one door, and they're all names on the door. That you go through, and then you are taken to that place.
Now, that's not Shirley MacLaine running down the beach with crystals. This is heavy-duty stuff. This is what we were warned about in the Bible.
She quoted from a book called The Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ. And this was about Jesus, obviously the jet setter. He wasn't hanging around Palestine. He was traveling to India and China. And the Aquarian master sitting in council had told us that Jesus was not always the Christ. That just as Jesus had earned the degree Christ by a life of strenuous service and equipping himself to find the Christ consciousness, just as Lincoln was not always president, Edward was not always king, neither was Jesus always the Christ. He had earned the degree Christ by these certain practices. And they had John the Baptist was also out seeking wisdom, and he also had pagan masters. This is what the, quote, Christian books were also talking about. I've since collected some. One was SPCK, Society for the Propagation of Christian Knowledge. It was from England, and they actually told us we should pay heed to Benjamin Creme and Alice Bailey and Helena Petrovna Blavatsky.
Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey are the de facto founders of the New Age movement, and their writings are still among the most authoritative and commonly cited texts among New Agers. Blavatsky co-founded the Theosophical Society in New York City in September of 1875. Though it is rarely acknowledged, Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society have had a profound influence on not just the spirituality of the West, but its social and political culture in general. Author Gary Lachman notes some of the prominent figures that have been influenced by Blavatsky. Quote, "For the poet W.B. Yeats, who knew her in her last days in London, she was like an Irish peasant woman, and for the novelist Kurt Vonnegut, writing in McCall's magazine in 1970, she was the founding mother of the occult in America. The poet T.S. Eliot, the artist Wassily Kandinsky, the inventor Thomas Edison, the creator of Oz, L. Frank Baum, and Mohandas Gandhi were only some of the people who over the years sat, figuratively or otherwise, at the incomparable Madam's feet." Theosophical historian K. Paul Johnson also speaks to this. Quote, "A remarkable feature of Theosophy's history is the disparity between its minuscule membership and its vast and varied cultural influence. Blavatsky's ideas inspired leading figures in the development of modern art. Political activism in colonial India and Ceylon owed an immense debt to theosophical influence. In the West, many social movements, such as educational reform, women's suffrage, and abolition of capital punishment, were advanced by the efforts of early theosophists. The Society's utopian aims have been very clear from its inception, as one of its stated objectives is, quote, to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color. Blavatsky insisted that, quote, this society was organized on this one principle, the essential brotherhood of man, and that a true theosophist, quote, must strive to realize his unity with the whole of humanity.
Bringing that unity from within to the surface of perception and understanding, that is a transformed world. That is a unified world.
We are unity. Distinction, nation, religion, creed, these are all illusions. We're building our lives around illusion. We'll build a utopia, a blissful utopia.
This universal brotherhood of man would be predicated on the occult principle that despite appearing different in their outward forms, all religions taught the same basic spiritual laws, a fact known and practiced in ancient times by a select group of initiates who guarded this knowledge. What we desire to prove, stated Blavatsky, is that underlying every ancient popular religion was the same ancient wisdom doctrine, one and identical, professed and practiced by the initiates of every country, who alone were aware of its existence and importance. The proofs of this identity of fundamental doctrine in the old religions are found in the prevalence of a system of initiation. To bring to light this ancient wisdom doctrine at the basis of all the world's religions was the main goal of Blavatsky's most notable works, The Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled, which are grand accumulations of occult and esoteric teaching from all over the world. The main inspiration for Blavatsky's work came from beyond the physical world. Through a process called channeling, Blavatsky came into spiritual contact with ascended beings who communicated to her thousands of pages of occult knowledge regarding the spiritual history of mankind and its evolutionary development. In a letter to a friend named Vera, Blavatsky described her channeling experiences. Quote, "Well, Vera, believe it or not, some enchantment is upon me. I am writing Isis Unveiled, not writing, rather copying out and drawing that which she personally is showing me. Really, it seems to me as if the ancient goddess of beauty in person leads me through all the lands of bygone centuries which I have to describe. Slowly, century after century, image after image, float out of nowhere and pass before me as if in a magic panorama. Races and nations, countries and cities, long vanish in the darkness of the prehistoric past, emerge and disappear, giving place to others, and then I'm told the consecutive dates." Blavatsky and her followers have insisted that what is contained in her writings is not new knowledge, but merely a modern-day expression of age-old teachings that were once universally known and practiced, but have largely been forgotten and dismissed since ancient times. Blavatsky believed her work to be the rebirth of that body of ancient esoteric teachings collectively known as the Ageless Wisdom, Ancient Mysteries, or Mystery School teachings. The wisdom religion was one in antiquity, and the sameness of primitive religious philosophy is proven to us by the identical doctrines taught to the initiates during the mysteries, an institution once universally diffused. Blavatsky insisted it was now time for this ancient wisdom religion to emerge once again and serve as the precondition for the unification of all the religions of the world and the global brotherhood of man. If properly put into practice, the ageless wisdom would bring about a golden age of global peace and prosperity unprecedented in human history.
Madame Blavatsky, as she's called, or sometimes referred to as HPB, her initials, was a real pioneer in the bringing of what's called the ageless wisdom to the West. The ageless wisdom is a term for the spiritual teaching that for most of human history was hidden or veiled, but it's like a golden thread that runs throughout the world religions and mythologies and has always been present in human consciousness in some form or another appropriate for the time.
It has always been for me about a practical application of the ageless wisdom teaching. These divine aspects of human nature are the very key to creating a culture of peace on earth, aware of our living inner and outer interconnectedness as never before.
We are, of course, the one human family, the one humanity. And we're working with energies of such beauty to take evolution forward to its next step.
The biggest hurdle to this goal of a global brotherhood of man was, of course, Christianity, which Blavatsky and Bailey believed had stubbornly clung to the erroneous notions of original sin and exclusive salvation through Jesus Christ. Such teachings, they believed, promoted disunity and hatred. They had no place in a world of peace and were irreconcilable with the ageless wisdom. Esoteric philosophy reconciles all religions, strips every one of its outward human garments, and shows the root of each to be incidental with that of every other great religion. It proves the necessity of an absolute divine principle in nature. It only refuses to accept any of the gods of the so-called monotheistic religions. Gods created by man in his own image and likeness, a blasphemous and sorry caricature of the ever unknowable. Blavatsky called Christianity the chief opponent of free thought. She wrote in The Secret Doctrine, the secret doctrine must someday become the just karma of the churches, more anti-Christian than the representative assemblies of the most confirmed materialists and atheists. She also insisted, quote, theological Christianity must die out, never to resurrect again in its present form. This in itself would be the happiest solution of all. Indian theosophist B.P. Wadia made clear Blavatsky's hatred for the Christian conception of a personal God and Creator and outlined what the theosophical student must do to combat this evil and divisive doctrine. Everywhere in the genuine theosophical books, with great and reiterated emphasis, the delusion of the personal God notion has been attacked. In the 2 volumes of her Secret Doctrine, HPB has exposed the fallacy. They pray to an extra-cosmic and personal God, higher than whom no exoteric worship can ever soar, making the task of the theosophical student most difficult. That task is to preach and promulgate the view that belief in such a God perverts human morals and deadens the action of the mind. To propagate this truth, the student himself has to master it. Unless he meditates on the attacks made in the Secret Doctrine on the personal God notion, he will not be able to get rid of this deeply ingrained acquisition, for it is an acquired and not an innate idea. The United Lodge of Theosophists similarly states, Theosophy has no qualm or hesitation about saying that belief in any type of personal or anthropomorphic God and the resultant worship, prayers, and devotion offered to such a being is something damaging, dangerous, and destructive. It is based on ignorance, immaturity, and superstition, and poses perhaps the main barrier and hindrance to the individual and collective spiritual liberation and progress of mankind. Theosophists insist that once the biblical notion of a personal God has been purged from the earth and the ancient mystery teachings exalted to their rightful place, true global peace and brotherhood can finally be established. Indeed, Blavatsky looked forward to the day when traditional Christianity was a thing of the past. If both church and priest could but pass out of the sight of the world as easily as their names do now from the eye of our reader, it would be a happy day for humanity. Universal unity and causation, human solidarity, the law of karma, reincarnation, Blavatsky stated, summarizing the main tenets of the ageless wisdom. These are the 4 links of the golden chain which should bind humanity into one family, one universal brotherhood. Alice Bailey, a devoted disciple of and successor to Blavatsky, also believed that the restoration of the mysteries or the ageless wisdom teachings would bring about a golden age of global peace and unity. These mysteries, when restored, she claimed, will unify all faiths. In 1922, Bailey solidified the influence of the Theosophical Society in America and the rest of the world by founding the Lucis Trust, a non-profit organization which has consultative status with the United Nations. Originally named Lucifer Publishing Company, the trust has been used as a means of publishing and disseminating Bailey's 20-plus volumes on the ageless wisdom. Bailey also founded the Arcane School, an offshoot organization of Lucis Trust, as an education center aimed at, quote, training in New Age discipleship. Both of these organizations are alive and well to this day, in consort with the United Nations, helping to advance mankind's initiation into the age of Aquarius.
Look at the case of Alice Bailey. Here was somebody who had no background in literature and writing books, yet was able to turn out 20 major books that are all still in print and are all still affecting people, that have become a ground and base for so much of the esoteric tradition in our time. Mrs. Bailey, as you know, started working in a Theosophical center on the West Coast. She had a mission, she had a calling, this wonderful interconnectedness that she believed so passionately for.
Bailey popularized the idea of the New Age, and she specifically emphasized the coming changes that the Age of Aquarius would bring about on the planet, most notably humanity's growing realization of its oneness. She stated in The Reappearance of the Christ, quote, if the word initiation signifies the processes of entering into, then it is indeed true today that humanity is undergoing a true initiation as it enters into the new age of Aquarius. It will then be subject to those energies and forces which will break down the barriers of separation and which will blend and fuse the consciousness of all men into that unity which is distinctive of the Christ consciousness. Like Blavatsky, Bailey saw traditional biblical teachings as the main hindrance to the unification of the world, and she was confident that the New Age Christ was adamantly working to reverse the damage caused by centuries of Christian dogma. She stated in The Externalization of the Hierarchy, quote, the Christian Church has laid so much emphasis on Christ's unique position as the one and only Son of God that great error has crept in and has been fostered for centuries. Christ himself foresaw the possibility of this error and tried to offset it by pointing out that we are all the sons of God and that greater things than I do shall you do, a statement which no commentators have ever understood or adequately explained. The occult fact is that there is no being on earth, from the very lowest form of life to the very highest, which is not moving onward towards a greater and finer expression of divinity, and Christ himself is no exception to this universal evolutionary law. Denying that Christ's death on the cross literally happened or had any significance whatsoever, she stated, it must be remembered that it is the teaching given by the Christ which saves humanity, not any symbolic death upon a cross. Men must save themselves by their reaction and their response to the teaching given in its purity by the Christ. She also denied the existence of hell, stating, quote, there is, as you well know, no angry God, no hell, and no vicarious atonement. There is only a great principle of love animating the entire universe. This teaching about hell is the remainder of the sadistic turn which was given to the thinking of the Christian Church in the Middle Ages, and to the erroneous teaching to be found in the Old Testament about Jehovah, the tribal god of the Jews. Jehovah is not God. As these erroneous ideas die out, the concept of hell will fade from man's recollection, and its place will be taken by an understanding of the law, which makes each man work out his own salvation upon the physical plane, which leads him to right the wrongs which he may have perpetrated in his lives on earth, and which enables him eventually to clean his own slate. As we can see, these are the exact same views that are promoted in modern New Age texts like A Course in Miracles, suggesting that the author of A Course in Miracles, Helen Schucman, either copied Bailey's views or that perhaps both are from the same demonic source. Like Blavatsky, Bailey claims to have received her teachings by way of channeling and worked in partnership with ascended beings, especially the ascended master known as Dejwa Kul, also called the Tibetan. Alice Bailey's husband, Foster Bailey, noted the spiritual source of his wife's teachings, quote, "Modern esotericism is a new phenomenon in the Western world, pioneered by the Tibetan teacher Dejwa Kul, working with H.P. Blavatsky. Again, this time working with Alice Ann Bailey, the same master teacher has provided the interim teaching needed for conscious entry into the new Aquarian age."
And as the Tibetan has pointed out, the material given through Madame Blavatsky and Alice Bailey is not finished. There is still more to come.